Quick question for you all. How can we revolutionise the way we farm and feed the world while tackling some of the biggest sustainability challenges of our time? Well, today I'm going to be joined by the CEO of Eden Green. His name's Eddy, and Eden Green is a company that's transforming agriculture with their innovative vertical greenhouse technology. But Eden Green is not just growing produce. They're redefining how fresh, affordable and sustainable greens can reach our tables. So I want to learn more about their cutting-edge microclimate technology, how it customises the growing environment for each individual plant, to a streamlined distribution model that delivers produce from farm to shelf in 48 hours. And Eden Green is also setting a new standard for the future of farming. And in today's conversation, Eddy's going to be sharing his vision for a network of greenhouses that can significantly reduce food waste, lower emissions, and make food produce more accessible than ever. What does this mean for the future of agriculture and our ability to sustainably feed a growing population? Well, these are a few areas that I invite you to join me in discussing today. I want to take a time out to express my gratitude to everyone who supports my mission of delivering daily content to you in 165 countries. I couldn't do it without you, and I couldn't do it without my sponsors. And today I want to give a quick shout out to Kiteworks, who recently told me that defence contractors are facing immense pressure to comply with things like CMMC 2.0 security standards. And finding a secure, easy-to-use file-sharing platform that meets those guidelines can be a big challenge. So, quick shout-out to any defence contractors listening out there. CMMC 2.0 compliance doesn't have to be a headache. Consider Kiteworks your fast track to authorisation. And as a FedRAMP moderate authorised solution, they cover nearly 90% of CMMC 2.0 Level 3 requirements. For you, that means less time, less effort, less cost. And while others struggle with DIY approval processes and clunky apps, you'll breeze through with their zero trust framework. So don't let compliance slow you down, is what I'm trying to say. Simply visit kiteworks.com to get started. That's kiteworks.com to learn more about Kiteworks' secure content platform for CMMC compliance. But with my thank yous out of the way, it's now time to jump right into today's interview with a fantastic guest. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to Dallas, Texas, where Eddy's waiting to join us. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Eddy. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Great to be here. My name's Eddy Badrina. I am the CEO of Eden Green out of Fort Worth, Texas.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. There's so much I'm excited to talk about because every day I try and get people thinking differently about technology in areas they don't associate with technology. Certainly not vertical indoor greenhouses, but we'll get to that in a minute. So to begin with, Eddy, can you share the inspiration and vision behind Eden Green and what motivated you to venture into this realm of vertical indoor greenhouses?
Sure. So Eden Green was founded by two South Africans, actually, Jacques and Eugene Van Buren, and they're still on staff as my CTO and CIO. And really what they were trying to do was trying to grow greens and just nutritious produce in an area of the world that was austere, both in terms of environment as well as in terms of finances. And so they invented this tech out of their garage, actually. It's a classic technology story, trialing probably 100 different ways to grow produce in a controlled environment. So they started that in 2010, brought it to the States in 2016. And I came on board in 2020 after they had, I would say, proven the technological proof of concept. I came on board to help bring it to market and to commercialize it.
And the rest, as they say, is history. And for people that are listening and hearing about Eden Green for the very first time, how does Eden Green's technology and distribution model significantly differ from, let's say, traditional farming and supply chain methods?
The vision of Eden Green really is to sustainably farm and feed people. I want more people to eat more greens. And the only way that we can do that is to make it more affordable, more accessible, available to everyone, and then finally to have it to be more safe. And so how we do that is through this technology. It's a vertical growing platform, but within a greenhouse. And so I'll stop right there, because for anyone inside of ag or ag tech, that puts a lot of questions in their mind. For folks outside of ag tech, they're like, okay, great, it's a greenhouse.
Yeah.
But to grow vertically in a greenhouse is very much a new thing. It's an innovative thing, so innovative that it is actually patented here in the United States and about 20 other countries.
And just how big are these greenhouses, just for scale purposes that we try to think in our heads right now and visualize?
So 1.5 acres, I can't convert that to hectares. You would think I would know that by now. But it's 1.5 acres of these greenhouses. That's equivalent to anywhere from 40 to 50 acres of conventional farming.
Wow. That's a little bit bigger than the one in my garden there. Oh, man.
Yeah, yes. Yes.
No. And I was also, when I was doing a little research, I looked at you recently launched a flagship herb program. So tell me a little bit more about that, and any challenges faced in creating a complete herb suite all under one roof. Anything you could share around that?
Yeah, absolutely. So herbs is, a multi-billion-dollar industry. But like the greens industry, the lettuce industry, it's predicated on some very, I would call, shaky supply chain foundations. And so what we really wanted to do was to penetrate that herb market and provide a way for all the major herbs to be grown under one roof in one facility and adjacent to this distribution network that we have here in the United States and then beyond. And so I can give you an illustration of just one herb, which will be, a very, very illustrative of just the problem that we're having. So basil here in the United States is by far and large the largest generator of revenue in the herbs industry. And to this point, 99% of basil is grown either in Hawaii or in South America. Oh. So you're really looking at, if you want to have basil on your pizza or in pesto, you're really looking at air freight to make that happen for the entire United States. And thinking about all the inputs to that air freight, the jet fuel, the infrastructure degradation, all the shipping past the air freighting into a distribution center, not to mention just the food safety aspects, getting, basil from overseas and then bringing it here. You're really just tacking cost upon cost upon cost. And so what ends up happening is your basil is super expensive just to get a sprig of it here. That is just one of a dozen major herbs here in the United States, and almost all of them go through some sort of air freight mechanism to get to your dinner table or to your restaurant table. So if we can shrink that down into, 2 miles away, a mile away, and in some cases, we're 200 yards away from a distribution center, we really cut down the cost on that. Plus, everyone knows where it's coming from, and we can trace our harvests right down to the plant spot. And so, if there's ever any case of having to wonder where your basil leaf came from, we can do that, trace that with astonishing clarity and granularity.
So many important points that you raise there. I mean, from wanting people to eat more greens and knowing that you've got to make it more accessible, more affordable. And then you look at something like basil that you mentioned there, you've got the overseas costs and also environmental impacts. And right now, sustainability and reducing food waste, critical issues, big talking points. So How does your approach extend the shelf life of produce and mitigate food and waste and those emissions from flying all this stuff around the world?
That's a great question. So off the bat, whether we're growing herbs or lettuce, which we grow both, you're seeing around 40% waste in the supply chain. A lot of it, actually, the vast majority of that 40% is actually on the harvest field. Much of it doesn't even get, passed into a truck, past the field. So we shrink that 40% waste down to about 2 to 3%. And so when you think about food waste, reducing food waste before it even gets to the table, you're already looking at, a massive reduction in just the food that's left spoiled on the ground. And once it gets to the table, because we harvest anywhere from 24 to 48 hours before it's shipped, what ends up happening is it lasts on your table much longer. So when you come here in February and we give you a head of lettuce that's just harvested like we would any other head of lettuce, I can almost guarantee you that lettuce will last in your fridge for anywhere from 2.5 to 3 weeks.
Wow.
That is way different than the consumer's experience right now. I don't know about in the UK, but here there's this horrible cycle of buying bagged lettuce or a whole head lettuce, putting it in the fridge, and then 4 days later throwing it out without ever opening it, and then replacing it with another bag of lettuce. And so that is the epitome of food waste. And honestly, it's also, in my view, it's the epitome of arrogance of a developed country that we can even think that's remotely all right to do.
100% with you. And everything that you said there resonated with me. It's the same here in the UK. And we have people listening all around the world. And I suspect they have very similar stories to share too. So it is phenomenal what you've achieved here and what problems you've been able to solve. And you've been able to do this largely because of this innovative microclimate technology at Eden Green. And can you expand on that and also how it contributes to the customized growth environment for each individual plant? Because again, incredibly cool what you're doing here.
Sure. So really, when we talk about this microclimate technology, what we're talking about is the ability to control the three main factors for a plant, which is water, light, and air, but to control it in such a way that it's totally directed at each individual plant spot. So in a typical greenhouse or in a typical indoor vertical farm, you control the ambient environment around the plants, right? So in an 1.5 acre facility of a similar competitor, whether it's a greenhouse or indoor farm, you're controlling that whole cubic volume of the 1.5 acre facility. For us, we're really only concerned about the 12 inches around each plant spot. And so that's how we control it. So what we end up effectively doing is only really worrying about and controlling 1/5 of the cubic volume of that greenhouse. So in that 4/5 savings, if you will, that's 4/5 savings of light electricity. It's savings of water, and it's the savings of having to direct the air and control the humidity, the carbon dioxide level, the temperature of the air. So that's fundamentally how we can achieve such great savings. And, from a sustainability perspective, we are economically as well as environmentally sustainable. And so that's how we can do that as well, is just because it's at the plant level, being able to just focus on the microclimate around each plant spot.
So if we look at your vertical greenhouse model and your technology, if we zoom out for the moment, what kind of impact does it have on the traditional agricultural supply chain, especially concerning things we've already mentioned, like food miles and packaging waste, etc.? I would imagine there's a pretty big impact there too.
It is. We have currently focused just on herbs, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry. and then lettuce, which is twice, maybe three times the size of the herb industry, depending on how you want to measure it. And that's just the start. So we aim to have a huge impact on those two industries, just because we can grow those almost better than anyone else. I will say we're not a silver bullet. I think some of our competitors in the past, other folks in the controlled environment ag industry, CEA, have claimed to be the one-stop shop, and we're not it. We want to be laser focused on the things that we can grow really well, that we have our competitive advantage in, which then allows other farmers to focus on things where they might have a competitive advantage. So I think the net of it, Neil, is that by us focusing on these 2 or 3 or 4 major areas, it allows other parts of the industry to find their competitive advantage and be more efficient and effective and ultimately more affordable to the consumer.
And a big powerful stat here I was reading before you came on the podcast to join me today is 40% of food waste occurs before even reaching consumers. So, I mean, again, what role do you see Eden Green playing in reshaping the broader agricultural industry and being ultimately more efficient, more sustainable? Because I think there's a huge, excuse the pun, it's a huge appetite for this right now, isn't it?
It sure is. We think that the way that we're pioneering this technology and pioneering the use of distribution systems in a much more efficient way is actually going to push the rest of the industry forward. We would love for them to look at us and say, hey, we realize that Eden Green is not a one-stop shop and it's not an end-all be-all, but we like the way that they're thinking about farming and feeding people. We like the way that they're thinking about affordability, accessibility, and food safety. We want them to look at their own technological models, whether it's a conventional farm or otherwise, and say, okay, how can we pattern ourselves after Eden Green in terms of the directives that they want for their company and for the consumer? And I would say the other way is just pushing the boundaries of the technology itself. Like we've not even explored what it would look like to have a vertical farm like ours, but in a non-CEA environment. What does it look like to have it on a traditional farm? Can farmers who are usually out in rural areas and the next generations who may want to be closer to urban populations, but they still love farming, can we empower them to bring farms closer to these urban populations? And because of that, we're limiting food waste, and we were lessening emissions, and we are making labor shortages more of an issue of the past. So I think those are the big ways that we can help push the industry forward as a whole.
And if we look into that future already, only a few months from 2025, really, and how do you envision the future of sustainable farming and distribution? How do you see that continuously evolving? And are there any teasers that you can share around your plans for expanding Eden Green's footprint and the impact that you will continue to have on this agricultural industry?
Yeah, we're continuing to expand in an industry that has seen a little bit of, I wouldn't say contraction, but stagnation, because of, I would say, investors have been burned by past promises of other companies. But in our case, we broke ground on a $40 million expansion project last year, and it's continuing to move on. We expect to triple our overall growing capacity in less than 12 months. More than half of the growing space will be dedicated towards expanding our herb program. And then overall, I would say the next 5 years, my goal is to have 20 production facilities built here in the United States. And as that grows, we'll have, I would say, aggregately 80% herbs, 20% lettuce. And so with that amount of volume, we're able to expand existing partnerships. And, I'm totally open to overseas partnerships as well. And so we're actively looking at those.
Well, one of the reasons I love recording this podcast every day is I get to learn from brilliant people like you every year and how you're making a difference with technology in the world, not just in your immediate location in the US and looking at expanding overseas. It's phenomenal what you've achieved. I'm going to see if there's something we can do for you in return for sharing your story here, because some of the biggest names in business, VC funding and tech have either been guests or maybe on occasion listen to this podcast. So is there a person you'd love to have a private breakfast or lunch with, and why? Because he or she might just get to hear this. So let's see what we can manifest together today. Who would it be?
Oh, it would, hands down, it would be David Friedberg. He's one of the hosts of the All In podcast, which is fantastically popular here in the United States, especially on the West Coast with the VCs. That they're all the hosts of the All In podcast are VCs, but David Friedberg in particular. He's a venture capitalist, an investor, and he's the CEO of Ohalo Genetics. And they're doing some really, really groundbreaking work on plant genetics. And to be able to break bread with him and trade notes would be fantastic.
What a great choice. I will throw that out into the universe, into the ether. Let's see what we can manifest together. And of course, this is an audio podcast, and the size and scale of what you're doing here is difficult for people to visualize, I think. So for anyone listening wanting to find out more information, maybe they want to see images, videos, and just find out more information, and they could be located anywhere in the world wanting to take you up on your offer of expanding this overseas, where would you like to point them?
So edengreen.com, so EDEN green.com is our website. And we actually have a new video up on YouTube. If you look up our Eden Green YouTube channel, there's a great video on herbs. Actually, in the voiceover of a mimicking David Attenborough. So for all the UK British accent folks out there, it's actually quite amusing.
Oh, I will be checking that out at the end of this podcast. And there'll also be a blog post on my website, techblogwriter.co.uk. I will embed that video on that and when I promote this episode. So I urge everyone to check that out. And I just love chatting with you today, hearing more about these vertical indoor greenhouses that are transforming the way that you sustainably farm and ultimately feed people fresh, affordable produce. I think with the arrival of supermarkets in the world, we kind of lost our way over the last decade and more. And the fact that you're using new technology to efficiently grow safer, more sustainable lettuce, using less water, energy and carbon emissions, I just want to shout this stuff from the rooftop. So thank you for shining a light on it today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Neil.
Wow. Massive thank you to Eddy for sharing his fascinating insights that provide a glimpse into a future where farming is not just more sustainable, but more efficient and more accessible. We've all walked in supermarkets and there's whole heaps of junk food that is cheap as chips, as they would say here in the US, but fresh, organic, but fresh produce is typically very expensive. And that's just one of the reasons why Eden Green's approach to vertical greenhouse farming feels like a real game changer, because it's addressing everything from food waste to carbon emissions, while also ensuring that that fresh produce reaches consumers faster than ever before, so that you're not throwing a lettuce out of the fridge every 4 days and replacing it with another one. We need to do something different. And as Eddy shared there, the potential for this technology to transform the agriculture industry is immense. It's also great to hear their plans to expand across the US, but beyond. And if you're listening inspired by today's discussion and you want to learn more about Eden Green's innovative work, please visit their website, connect with Eddy. And if you've got any questions or any viewpoints you want to offer, please email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. DM me on the socials at Neil C. Hughes if you want to tell me more about how your organisation or how you will embrace the future of sustainable farming. Thank you for listening today, but stay curious, stay engaged, keep exploring the possibilities of technology to create a better world. You might say I'm a dreamer, but hey, I'm not the only one. And on that note, I will bid you a fond farewell, but I'll be back in your podcast feed with another guest bright and early tomorrow. Bye for now.